Now, the following video is going to be a little bit more detailed and in-depth than previous FPL videos I've made. You know, it's really important in my mind to have a good plan together for at least the first 5 or so game weeks, and maybe even a bit longer term in terms of when you're going to use your chips. And I'm hoping the information I share in this video is going to help you make those plans. So stick with me and I'll take you through it all. So first up then, I thought, like I said, looking at the first 5 fixtures is a really important thing to do. And I've taken this graphic from FPL Tom Hadley on Twitter. And what he's done is ranked all of the teams in the league by the quality of their first 5 fixtures. So again, you know, going back to the point, you don't just build a team for game week 1, you're building it for, you know, the season long. And given that we can accumulate 5 transfers, you've got multiple chips, etc., I would suggest picking a team to get you through the first 5 game weeks without a major planned transfer. That would kind of be how I'd be looking to play it. You know, if you can get to game week 5, accumulating 5 free transfers and not having to use a single one, you're in a really good position in my mind, and hopefully would have scored some decent points. So looking at this, we've got Liverpool as the top team for fixture quality, Fulham in 2nd, Newcastle 3rd, Southampton in 4th, Man United and Crystal Palace 5th and 6th. The worst teams for fixture quality, we've got Leicester, Ipswich, Wolves, Arsenal, so those picking Arsenal defenders. First 3, you know, they got Aston Villa, Tottenham and Man City basically in their first 5. Forget the first 3. That's relatively tough, and I know people are going to think, you know, Arsenal, best defence in the league, etc. But do you think early on in the season, Aston Villa, Tottenham and Man City are nailed on clean sheets for them? You know, that's over half of their first 5 fixtures. I'm not too sure. So just something to bear in mind. I know I've got Arsenal defenders in my team at the moment. Then West Ham and Brentford are apparently the 2 worst teams for fixture quality and difficulty. You know, Man City, kind of middle of the road. We all know how good they are going forwards, right? I don't really think, unless it's super difficult fixtures, wouldn't really put me off going for someone like Erling Haaland, for example. But yeah, hopefully this sort of difficulty ranker gives you an idea of the kind of teams to target in your team and for the first 5 weeks. I know this has been spoken about quite a lot at the start of the game because FPL revealed this new rule before the game even launched, that we can accumulate now up to 5 free transfers, but I haven't spoken about it on a video of mine. I've had a few questions in comments of previous videos saying, can you just give your thoughts on what the 5 free transfer rule means for the game? I've tried to summarize it here, but in essence, you can accumulate up to 5 free transfers. And when you use your chips, previously you just go back to 1 free transfer the week after, but now you keep the total number of transfers that you've accumulated up to 5. So chips do not impact your transfer count. What I think the 5 free transfer rule opportunities it gives you is you can have mini wildcards throughout the season. If I'm doing a wildcard in FPL, right, most of my team at the time I'm fairly happy with, and ultimately I probably make 5 to 6 changes with my team when I play a wildcard, and that's, you know, you can do that with the free transfers you accumulate. One thing that it means, in my opinion, is that players that get off to a good start, they don't need to make transfers and just get such a big advantage. Like I said, going back to the fixture planning, right? If you pick a relatively safe team, say it's got Haaland and Salah in it, you've got the best captain each week, decently solid defence and, you know, supporting midfielders, etc., and you can get through those first 5 weeks in a reasonable position without having to use a transfer, that basically gives you, before game week 19, when obviously the wildcard runs out, it gives you an opportunity to play a mini wildcard and then your actual wildcard, you know, chip in that time. I just think it gives you such an advantage. And if you're ahead of players already, I mean, it's just going to boost you even further, right? And also what I think it does, unfortunately, might make my content a little bit more boring because it really improves, in my mind, the points benefit you'll get from rolling a transfer, because ultimately you can't do too much to your team with 2 free transfers. 1 free transfer, you know, you've got to swap 1 player out. With 2, you can sort of change the structure of your team a little bit, but you can only use 2 frees. But with 5 free transfers, you can change players in every position, save yourself a bit of cash on a defender, go for a premium forward, you know, that kind of restructuring. Having 5 free transfers really gives you the freedom to do that. So I think rolling a transfer just becomes that much more valuable. I've seen people suggesting that maybe picking good bench players as well, likes of Rodgers, for example, and maybe a plethora of 4.5 million defenders that play every game and have a good chance of, you know, attacking returns and clean sheets. If you have a good bench, it means you'll be less likely to use transfers, and it will allow you to, get closer and closer to accumulating that 5 and having those mini wildcards. And I quite like that idea. I think it's a good thing to think about, FPL teams I've built in previous seasons, I like to go fairly weak on my bench, really only having one bench player that I'd be comfortable starting. But with this rule, I think having a stronger bench could be a way to play it. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the 5 free transfer rule. One of the most powerful things in FPL in my mind is who you pick as your captain week on week. And what I've done is put a little captaincy picker, my favourite captains at least, for the first 4 game weeks of the season, because I think it's important looking at who you think is the best captain and then making sure for at least the first 4 or 5 game weeks that you own who you think in your mind is the best captain, right? Because most people's FPL teams, a large majority of the points it scores are from your captain, right? So game week 1, I'd say there are genuinely 4 captaincy options in game week 1 without really having to think too deeply. You've got Salah against Ipswich, Isak against Southampton, Haaland, he's always a captain shout, whoever he's playing. The only game I'd consider captaining someone else or say he's not an option is when he's playing Arsenal at the Emirates. Other than that, I think he could do well in any game. Although he's got Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, so that's a relatively tough fixture. Wouldn't be completely scared of captaining him, but I think he's one of the weaker ones of the 4. Then you've got Son at Leicester away. Now, like I said, all of these guys are genuinely captain picks, right? So it's not necessarily saying that Salah or Haaland is essential at this stage. I'd probably say Salah is the best captain. But if I had to captain Isak, Son or Haaland, I wouldn't be too worried about it. In game week 1 at least. Game week 2 is where it gets a little bit different. Haaland has got Ipswich at home. Now, obviously Salah is a captaincy option there as well. Brentford at home is a good fixture for Liverpool. But Haaland, he's just the best captain that week in my opinion. So a lot of people saying, should I go with Haaland, should I not? With that game week 2 captaincy in mind, and the 5 free transfers, etc. You can get rid of him after that game if you really want to. But pick him in your team from the start of the season, captain him in that game week 2, maybe future game weeks, we'll get onto that in a second. And then come sort of game week 5, 6 time, if you really wanted to save a bit of cash, you could get rid of him. But I would just play it safe and start with him to make sure, at least for the first 2 weeks, you've got the best captain. Looking at game weeks 3 and 4, apologies for that. Game week 3, I think there are 3 captaincy options. You've got Salah at home to Nottingham Forest, Haaland at home to Brentford, and then Isak away at Wolves. I would say I'd probably favour the home players. And between Nottingham Forest and Brentford, Nottingham Forest now under Nuno, one of the best teams in the league actually. Certainly when Nuno took over, they became one of the best teams in the league for expected goals conceded. Brentford are not in that position. I think Haaland is the best captain in game week 3 against Brentford. And then game week 4, Man United at home to Liverpool. And that's obviously a potential Salah opportunity. And Haaland away at West Ham. I think Haaland is the best captain in game week 4. So we've gone through. Game week 1, I'd say it's Salah. Game week 2, I'd say it's Haaland. Game week 3, I'd say it's Haaland. In game week 4, I'd say it's Haaland as well. So for 3 of the first 4 game weeks, I think the strongest captaincy pick is Erling Haaland. So I think it really makes, you can look a bit further in advance. I'm just looking at the first 4 game weeks, but you can look even further in advance than that. I think game week 5, Haaland has Arsenal, and then in 6, he's got Newcastle. So a couple of fixtures there where you might question the captaincy, particularly that Arsenal game, right? So maybe that's the point where you sell him if you go for him. But when picking your team and the premiums that you select in it, I really think you should do so with captaincy in mind. Now, I've given my opinion there on Haaland. If you think game weeks 1 to 4, there are better, different captains, then by all means pick them in your team. But that's the way I'm thinking about planning in terms of captaincy. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the chips. Now, I'm going to give a little bit of a synopsis as to what they are and how I think they're best utilised, and some tips, for example, for how to best use them as well. So a wild card allows you to make unlimited transfers in the week that it's played, and then your team will be that for the rest of the season unless you use it again. So you have until game week, before the game week 20 deadline, so game week 19 basically, to play your wild card, first one, and then you get a second one after that. One thing that has caught me out in the past, and I don't want anyone to make the same mistakes as me, any gained value you've made on players that you then sell on the wild card, if you sell them and then buy them back, you'll buy them back for their now value. So for example, as you would know, if players go up in price, you get 0.1 million for every 0.2 they go up in price. So, for example, say Trippier goes up to 7 million. I'm just picking Trippier as an example. I don't necessarily think he will. Say between, the start of the season and you playing your wild card, Trippier goes up to 7 million. His sell price will be 6.5 million. And if you want to buy him back after tinkering with your team, you'll be selling him for 6.5, then buying him back for 7. That's really hurt me in the past. I've made that mistake a few seasons ago, and I don't want you guys to do the same thing. So what I would say is use tools like the squad builder available on Fantasy Football Hub. 50% off, by the way, to Fantasy Football Hub in a link in the description. But yeah, that's kind of some tips and tricks around the wildcard. I would say that the wildcard is best played when, number one, you can't field 11 players easily. You've got a breadth of injuries, long-term injuries across your team. You need to take big hits in order to get 11 players out. I would play your wildcard in that scenario. Potentially during massive fixture swings, if lots of players in your team get a really tough run of fixtures, that could be a time to use it. And also just in general, when you're really sick of your team, you've got 6 or 7 terrible players in your team that are not performing at all, that's the time to play your wildcard as well. At the end of this video, I'll get onto a bit more specifics, particularly around the first 19 game weeks as to when might be the best time to play your chips. But that would be my kind of general thoughts on the wildcard. The bench boost. Points scored on your bench count towards your total when you use the bench boost. You get one of these per season, and it's best used, in my mind, at the point in time where you think your bench is going to score the most points, quite simply, obviously in combination with your starting 11. Now, sometimes you might wish to use your wild card in ahead of the bench boost in order to get the best value out of it, because ultimately, you can pick 15 players on your wild card, each that are going to start for their team, and then the week after hit the bench boost. I would say the bench boost is arguably, over one game week at least, the most powerful if you use it properly. You've got 4 extra players in your team basically that can score you points. So if you pick the right players on your bench boost, and they all score, for example, it's something like 30 points, right? You could potentially get from your bench boost. So it's a really good chip, but you have to play it properly. I don't know how many people actually do it, but given that the time we have now until the start of the season is basically an open wildcard for your team, some people might decide to use their bench boost and just get it done in game week 1. I genuinely think this is a viable strategy, and I've put together what I think is probably the best bench boost team here in the Fantasy Football Hub AI team creator. Pickford, Robertson, Gabriel, Martinez, Hudson-Odoi, Salah, Eze and Kunku, Haaland, Isak and João Pedro, Johnston, Konsa, Barco and Rodgers on the bench. I think in terms of, a strong 11 and a bench covering all the captaincies, I've just got Salah there as captain, Hudson-Odoi with a good fixture against Bournemouth. I think this is probably the best bench boost team you can build. So if you want to play your bench boost in game week 1, I'd say lessons I've learned from previous seasons. I've always been a bit disappointed by my bench boost. I've never really got that many points out of it. And I'd always kind of regret leaving it until later on in the season, where I kind of feel pressured to build a team in order to use my bench boost chip. Whereas if you use it in game week 1, you just get it out of the way. And I would say this team, thinking about picking a team for the first 5 game weeks that could do you really well, I think this team would be fine. Just allow yourself to accumulate those 5 free transfers and then use them to kind of save yourself a bit of money on the bench to then have that team long term until you want to play your wild card. Maybe just some thoughts, but if you were looking to play your bench boost in game week 1, that's the kind of team I would pick. The final chip to talk about then is the free hit. There's also a triple captain, but ultimately the triple captain kind of speaks for itself. It's a game week where your captain scores triple points, sorry, not double. That kind of speaks for itself as to what it is, and I would use that on a game week where you expect your player to score the most points of any player could score in a season, right? So Haaland, Salah, etc. get a double game week or really good fixture against a promoted team, you could use your triple captain. The free hit, however, gives you unlimited transfers during one game week, and then your team gets reverted to where it was before at the previous game week deadline. Get one of these per season, and I would say, I'm not sure how many blanks and doubles we're going to get, but the free hit is best used during blank game weeks, double game weeks, or maybe just before wildcarding. Say your team is completely dead, you could use your free hit the week before and then wildcard the week after to fix your team. And my point is, all of these chips could be tactically deployed in conjunction with one another. Just something to think about. But yeah, that would be kind of my synopsis of the chips. Another question I've been getting is around wildcard strategy. When is the best time, in my opinion, to play the wildcard? What I've done here is I've gone on fpl.team. I will link it in the description below. It's a fixture grid here for the first 19 fixtures, the first period where you can play the first wild card. And I just thought I'd talk through them and discuss when might be a good time to play it. Now, off the bat, I don't know about you, I've stared at this grid for 20 minutes before making this video, at least. And I cannot, other than maybe playing it in game week 4 when kind of Man City have a bit of a fixture turn, but then come game week 7, it looks really good for them. So at the moment, I am really struggling to pick out a game week where I think it's worth playing your wild card. I know that's a bit of a cop-out, I'll admit, but ultimately, I can't come to a conclusion as to when I think a definitive times to play that wild card. I really can't, and sorry that I can't give you a direct answer on that. Ultimately, I'll go back to my points about the wild card. It's best deployed when you have multiple long-term injuries in your team, for example, and you need to take, I would say I play in wild card when I need to do more than a -8. You know, when you get into the -12 territory, that sort of just says wild card time for me. Also, you know, if 6 or 7, maybe 5 or 6 players in your team, you just want to get rid of. They're not injured, but they're just not performing very well. That's when I'd consider playing my wild card as well. I don't see any massive fixture swings on this grid. I just don't. I don't see any worthy of playing the wild card. But if you do, if you can identify some fixture swings on it, let me know in the comments first of all. But if you can, I'd use a wild card at times of fixture swings. But, you know, those are the circumstances where I'd consider doing it. And looking at this fixture grid right now, like I said, I don't really see many fixture swings. So for me, the wild card would be individual team dependent. And I would just be saving it, to be honest. I would save it until you really need to use it. You know, if it's getting to game week 16, 17 time, you still haven't used it, maybe at that point in time, it could be a time to just get rid of it. Maybe only make 3 or 4 transfers because you've been so happy with your team beforehand. But ultimately, I think most of us will have a reason to play it with a lot of injuries, underperforming players, etc. that we want to get rid of. But in terms of fixture swings and timing the wild card before game week 1's even happened, I can't definitively say when you should play it, but let me know in the comments though if you have a different idea. Alright, that's the end of the video. I do feel like I rambled a little bit on that one. I don't know if I spoke any sense, so let me know in the comments if you thought my opinions and speeches there, etc. were useful. You know, I'm always open to different people's opinions, right? So if you disagree with anything I've said in this video, just be nice about it, but put it in the comments. I really don't mind having a bit of debate with people. Ultimately, you know, FPL, that's what it's all about. If we all had the same opinion and all agreed on the same things, we'd all have the same team and it would be a really boring game. So not only different players you pick, but the kind of thoughts you have around these strategies that I've just discussed are what is really going to differentiate us as players. So I wouldn't be surprised if people thought differently to me, to be honest. And like I said, just let me know in the comments if you do. If you did enjoy the video and find it useful for yourself, please leave me a like rating. I'll have plenty more FPL content coming your way before the start of the season. I'll pretty much have a video out every day, I'd imagine. And if you want to see those, you can subscribe to the Golden Goal channel, which should be just there on your screen. As always, I'm really grateful for everyone watching this pre-season content. The channel's been growing tremendously. The comments I've been getting, etc. It's great to chat FPL with people again. So just want to say thank you for that. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I will catch you in the next one.